Zoom site.
Yeah,
Okay.
I've found that like I mean with the cloud, I think it usually takes some processing time before the file's
That's
available,
okay.
but yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so let's get started. So Isaac, it's so great to see you. Thank you so much for being willing to, share your insight with our current Cabrillo engineering students.
Yeah,
So
happy
I'm
to.
gonna have you start out, like, where you grew up, what was your path to Cabrillo and path to choosing engineering, and go for it.
Yeah, very briefly, I grew up in southern Vermont. I went to born and raised in southern Vermont, came out of high school thinking I wanted to pursue outdoor leadership. Went to college for that for a year, realized I didn't want to do that. I liked it, just didn't want to do that as my whole career. And so I left school with zero plan and just traveled for a while, which ended in riding a motorcycle across country and then running out of money and then living in somebody's play shed in a backyard in Capitola and was a barista for a couple of years, taught motorcycle classes for the state for a couple of years, and then after I'd actually only been teaching for about 6 months when I decided that I wanted to go back to school, and I didn't really particularly care what for. I just wanted to have something to pursue. And I went to Cabrillo and I took I think the placement course and kind of skimmed the results, ignored them, put myself down as an accounting major, continued to be an accounting major until I transferred because I forgot about that. Um, and but in the process of that, I ended up wandering by the STEM Center, and I was really, really impressed with the uh, the to use a word vibe of the STEM Center. Like everybody there was just really friendly and really passionate and helping each other. And so I took intro to engineering and started off with just a couple classes because I was working full time. I saw I think Katie Griffin's saw her video as well, and took the words straight out of my mouth. She was saying how she was like just spent a long time at Cabrillo because she was just doing a couple classes at a time because she was also working full time to support herself. And it was the same for me. I went back to Cabrillo when I was 22 or 23, and I transferred when I was 25, almost 26. And uh yeah, yeah, I think 25. Um but that was just my lower division, and I had already spent some time, like I already had a year of classes from my last school, and so I was just taking it very easy. But I toward the end I ramped up a lot more because I remember I sat down with you at one point and we were going over my trajectory, and were looking at the pace I was moving at, and you said this is going to take a very long time if you just take one or two classes at a time. And at the time, that felt very harsh because I was in a position where I didn't feel like I could afford to take more classes. I didn't feel like I could handle them and work at the same time. But I started adding another class each semester until I was at full time, realized I could handle that. And then after I transferred, the workload basically doubled, and I could handle that too. So, like, looking back, the big difference was really about like what I thought I could do, which is exceptionally cliche. But also big differences like who I was surrounding myself with. So I really started to pick up when I started spending time with other people in the STEM center. That was kind of my default. If I didn't have anything else to do, I'd go and work in the STEM center, and being around other people who were also like just trying to get stuff done and passionate uh, was very focusing. So yeah, I remember by my senior year, I was like, oh man, I really wish that I had had this like same level of discipline or work ethic or when I was at Cabrillo, because it would have been a breeze. It would have absolutely been a breeze. And it was part of the part of the improvement was just that you get better at being effective when you practice it more. And like it's impossible to have that right at the beginning because you haven't done any of the practice yet. But part of it was also just holding myself back and just thinking that if I pushed even harder that I just collapse. And I was uh I was able to, once I set myself up for success by hanging out with the other people that were working really hard. And once I stopped beating up on myself every time I didn't get something the first time, then it unlocked quite a lot of additional
Oh,
capacity. So
oh, that's
yeah,
good. Thanks for telling me that story.
no,
And that helps students because, anyway, it's great. I'm glad you're sharing that.
yeah.
Okay, so then when you were nearing, like in your last year at Cabrillo, that's when you got introduced to the Bell program, and you had to make a decision if you wanted to go to a traditional university for your last 2 years to get your bachelor's degree, or go to the Bell program, which is a unique program. So maybe you could talk about that process of what you decided and why.
Yeah, that was definitely a really big turning point. Because yeah, I was introduced to the Bell program by some of the people that I'd been studying with. During Calc 2, I met Tim Lotz and Jordan Berger and just kind of decided that they were going to be my study partners. But and Mary Brazier. Yeah, decided that the three of them were going to be my study partners, whether they liked it or not. And Tim was looking into going to the Bell program, and I'd kind of heard of it before and immediately brushed it off because I decided it was too expensive and like I couldn't afford to take that time off and like go to Minnesota. Um, the Bell program it's a program out of Minnesota State University Mankato, and it's but it doesn't actually take place in Mankato. Mankato's near Minneapolis in the south of Minnesota. Bell program happens almost in Canada, in a very small town. It's run out of a community college, kind of similar vibes to Cabrillo, and it's run up in the iron mining country. And it's a program where you go to Minnesota for 1 semester after doing all your lower division work, and then you are given credit for working full time in industry for the last 4 semesters. And but it's a big commitment to go up to Minnesota for a semester when when my whole life was established in California. All the little things always come to mind first, like what am I gonna do about the room I'm renting? What do I do with all my stuff? All those little things that seem really big in the moment. Um, but that was kind of when I chose to uh, make to kind of, I guess there was a turning point between like doing just enough that I still felt like I could survive and actually kind of taking a risk and making an investment. And like survivorship bias says it was a great idea because it's worked out fantastic. But I would actually recommend it regardless. The Yeah, it was what made the difference was this in the same way that I kind of got drawn into the Cabrillo STEM and engineering program because I was very impressed by both the students and the instructors there. I just The Bell facilitators were open to hopping on a call and just kind of talking me through it. And so I did exactly that. I hopped on a call and chatted with them, and I was very, very impressed by their approach and the way they were thinking about education and their commitment to like student outcomes. They run a really impressive program that's committed to cutting away the kind of calcified parts of education that have crept in over the past however many decades, that aren't actually helping students. Like if you ever hear somebody in like an experienced engineer talk about how much of the stuff they learned in school they never used. That's going to happen regardless. There is a lot of stuff that like nobody can predict what you're going to use in industry, and there'll be plenty of things you learn that you never use, but there's definitely kind of a middle ground between a middle ground where you can cut away a lot of stuff, a lot of unnecessary detail. And what Bell has done is what they told me is they focus on just the fundamental principles. They focus really hard on the fundamental principles of each subject. So like thermodynamics, you're going to get the basic laws of thermo. You're going to get those drilled into you. But they're not necessarily going to go super into depth with little detailed things because that time would be better used on actually gaining experience in industry and learning the professional soft skills that will make you effective in industry, a good communicator, and a good learner. And they help students develop kind of the grit that's necessary to learn in industry because uh, there's functionally no difference between a a senior in engineering school and like a new grad other than a piece of paper. And there's no real, and so like if there's no difference between those two other than a piece of paper, what is it that actually made them an engineer? And like a year in, is that grad done learning? Like what actually matters in industry is that you're able to keep learning. And so uh, I can wander on about that for a long time, but what was attractive to me in the short term was the attitude of the facilitators. And also, I at that point was 26 and I was gonna be like 26 soon, and I didn't want to be just doing pure academics until I was like 28, 29. And that was enough. And so I figured it was worth the risk. And so I
Yeah,
yeah, went for it and haven't really looked back. And that was
yeah.
that was when I found out that I was still an accounting major. When I went to transfer, my transcripts were like, "Hey, you're a terrible accountant. You're a really bad accountant." And I was like, "Oh, okay, let's change that." And it was like, "Okay, you're an acceptable engineering
Yeah.
student."
Well, Bell knew you were an engineering major anyway, so I
Yeah,
just
they
want
did.
to piggyback on that a little bit and just say that, so the Bell program, the first semester, you're in Minnesota, although you can be here. You could be remotely for that first semester, and you're starting to take junior level classes and learn all the soft skills and how to be professional and how to connect with employers. And then your second through the rest of the semesters, you're working full time and taking classes online. And I remember you
Yes.
saying that you really just wanted to get into industry. And a
Yeah.
number of other students have done it too and been really, really happy. So I'm glad to hear that you were happy about that. And
Yeah, it
then
was it was a great choice.
I'm going to back up a little bit and say, when you were at Cabrillo, which engineering major were you most interested in?
Um, I vacillated, and in the end, it didn't matter because I went for integrated engineering, which is
Oh,
the degree that Bell gives you,
okay.
which is kind of whatever you want to make of it. Like some people go in a more chemical direction, some people go in a more electrical, some in a more mechanical. Like at Bell, you can take a focus. I didn't even take that. It's not particularly, I don't know. A focus, integrated engineering degree with a focus just means that you took a couple advanced classes in that area, and at least two-thirds of your co-ops were in that area.
Yeah.
And I took the advanced classes in mechanical and electrical. There was an
Okay.
argument to be made that I could have made an argument for either of those.
Okay.
But every time I told somebody like, "Oh, I was thinking about a mechanical focus," they just went, "Ah, mechanical engineer, got it." And that's not. And that was just kind of annoying. So I was like, you know what? I'm not doing a focus. It doesn't help. There's no
All
point.
right.
So yeah, integrated engineering, but I'm a manufacturing engineer now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I remembered that I connected you with Sierra Therm. when you
Yes.
were at Bell. So when you were at during that first semester at Bell, that's when you were starting to look at where you'd like to work and what industry. So maybe you could now talk about like the transition to choosing Sierra Therm and then your
Yeah, the
experience there, and then you moved to Joby, and then you could talk about Joby.
Yeah, I had a really great experience at Sierra Therm. So Sierra Therm, when I joined, they were called Schmid, but traditionally they were called Sierra Therm. Now they're called Sierra Thermal. Same company the whole time. What they make is process furnaces for various industries, whether it's like 300-foot long furnaces that are used to heat treat solar panels, and so basically glass with coatings on it, or they make shorter ones for various electronics. I got to work on the long ones, but yeah, I had so a huge amount of time in the first semester at Bell is spent applying for jobs. Worst case scenario, if you don't have an internship at the end, they'll give you a project, but they'll tell you like, hey, yeah, we want to fire you from this, and we'll be happy to fire you from this like school project as soon as you find an internship. And generally, very high success rate with the internships. So I I had done all of the online applications. Any engineering student who's started to look into internships is probably familiar with uh, how awful of a process that is, especially some how bad some of the websites are, where they're like, upload your resume, and they're like, all right, now type in everything that was on your resume because we're not gonna read it, and it's infuriating. So I submitted maybe 12 or 13 applications to various places I was interested in. And then I just decided that the whole process was kind of bogus. Not that it can't work, but I'll still stand by that statement.
Mm.
And like soulless. And I decided to use the same approach that helped me find Cabrillo and helped me find Bell. And I just went through people I trusted and started reaching out to people like you and said, "Hey, who do you respect? What who do you know in industry that you would be willing to connect me to?" And you connected me to Mike at Sierra Thermal, who's the director of engineering, and I got to sit down with him and Mike Elliott and Steve Calkins, and they're awesome. I was really lucky to work with both of them and with the rest of the team at Sierra Thermal, and they don't really do internships, or at least they didn't at the time. But they said, "Hey, tell you what, we understand that this is an internship and that it's going to be a year long or whatever." It was a little up in the air. It ended up being longer than we'd planned, which was great for everyone involved. And but so they just hired me as an engineering technician. And I got to work on a few different projects. I do remember the first day I showed up, I think they'd had a bunch going on. They didn't realize I was going to show up exactly that day. So they just handed me like don't tell Steve I told you this.
Mm.
They handed me a 1200 page, I'm doing this motion, but it was a PDF, 1200 page electrical schematic for a 300-foot long process furnace. And they just said, all right, on each page there will be lots of like anywhere between 0 and like 100 references to other pages where it's like this wire finishes on page 300. See how many mistakes there are, because there will be a couple in there won't be many, but there'll be one or two where just the page numbers don't match up. I was like, okay, iconic intern project. And with about 2 days later, when I was on page like 300 and I had developed a relatively automated process where I just typed things in and it flagged anything. Um, they just pulled me off on another project and we never spoke of it again. And I ended up, yeah, I ended up working on some mechanical projects, and then I got to work on an 800 kilowatt disconnect cabinet for a 300-foot long machine. I helped prototype and build it, and then provided feedback to the team. And then when it came around to actually installing that cabinet, I was the only one on the team that like didn't have a family and actively wanted to travel. So they're like, yeah, okay, we're sending you to India for 6 weeks. And after about 6 weeks, I was like, hey, I'm happy to stay. And so I ended up in India for 3.5 months installing those cabinets and kind of helping to direct a lot of the electrical installation in southern India, which was an awesome experience. And we also were having some parts locally fabricated, so I got to visit a lot of local shops and translate the they're an American company. Sierra Thermal is an American company that's been around for quite a while, so they work in American measurements, and so if we wanted to have uh, a sheet metal part made in India to save on like shipping it across the world, then we had to pick a suitable metric equivalent. And just you run into really interesting little things like they'll use the same weld call out notation, and so it'll be like if you want a stitch weld, it'll say you want a 1 inch gap and then a quarter-inch stitch or a quarter-inch stitch with a 1 inch gap. In the US, that'll be it'll say it'll say 0.25 and then 1.25 because the second call out is the pitch, and the pitch is, you know this, but the pitch is the stitch and the gap combined. In India, they use the exact same notation, but the second number is the gap, not the pitch. And so, like, I had a part fabricated locally, um, because like we had a vendor that was late supplying a stand for the disconnect cabinet. So I designed a weldment and we had it fabricated locally. And it wasn't a problem, but when it came in, I noticed that the stitches were unusually far apart. I was like, why? What is going on? And then I found out, and that's how I never would have found out otherwise. Because identical
So
notation.
interesting.
Yeah, all these little things that like when you're actually on the ground you run into, and it's like, oh well, I'm glad that I wildly overbuilt that weldment because it one of the design requirements was that it had to fit in our driver's like trunk because he was going to bring it over from the shop. So yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Wow.
I don't remember what question started that.
Oh, no, that's okay. So, okay, then you transitioned to Joby.
Yep. Yep. So I did a year at Sierra Thermal and then I wanted to the one thing that I like felt like I was not getting at Sierra Thermal was really severe attention to requirements, and because it's a relatively small company, they're not working with something like biomedical or aviation, so it's they follow lots of standards. They do amazing work, but there's not that kind of punitive oversight that you get with like the FAA. And I really wanted to experience what it was like to work somewhere where you really have to do things right, not just choose to, but like you have to know the standards, follow the standards properly. um, like just yesterday, I was wondering like why do we always only use thermocouples once? And I was trying to look around. I was like, it's not directly in our documentation, but there's probably a reason. So I was looking at the standards that we call out and in our documentation and found like, okay, AMS 2750, okay, pyrometry, the load thermocouple, a disposable load thermocouple may only be used once. Oh, that's why. And so like everything that we do is tied back to like a industry standard, and we can't deviate. And I wanted that experience, and like, proper document control. And so I chose to, for that reason, I chose to take a position at Joby. I actually started as an operator because that was what was available, as a way to get a foot in the door. Would not actually recommend that as an engineering student. It was a little light on engineering work, but I was able to like kind of sneak my way into getting a decent foothold in
Yeah,
engineering work. And roughly immediately after I graduated, I st I started transitioning to manufacturing engineering and
cool.
basically got permissions for everything that I hadn't had permissions to before. And yeah, so now I'm full-time manufacturing engineer, and I get to I get to fix to help fix all the problems that bothered me as an operator.
Mm,
And I also have like a lot more responsibility to like make sure that I have a good reason for why I'm doing everything.
yeah. So when
Uh,
you say operator, you mean an operator of equipment, and now
yeah,
you're designing the
yeah.
equipment. So could you
Uh,
name some products that you would design? And I see you have a Joby shirt on.
yeah. So we I'm in additive manufacturing.
Yeah.
Uh I, I don't think I can really say what specifically we make other than that we make parts for the plane.
Yeah.
Uh, our department doesn't design the parts. We what we do is the like part designers in various departments will are essentially our customers, and they say, "Hey, I have a part that is really hard to make with traditional
Right.
techniques, and but I think we could 3D print it out of metal. We do metal 3D printing, so
Okay.
uh, which is a whole other world from like filament deposition. Which,
Yeah.
funny enough, the composites team does more of that than we do.
Okay.
Um, and so what? As a manufacturing engineer, a lot of my job is making sure that all of the manufacturing processes are extremely repeatable. Like if there's a part of the process that's relying on just operator skill, it either has to be the training either has to be extremely tightly controlled, or and like the results have to be measurable, or we need to find a way to make that not rely on just operator
Okay.
skill. So like, if we're gonna wash parts in a basket and they need to be fixtured correctly, because if the only thing that's stopping those parts from falling out while the machine is washing them is like the operator is good with zip ties, that's not acceptable. It's not repeatable. And while parts are in development, if it's a dev part and it's like not going on the plane, that's okay. Because you
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
what? Our operators are really good with zip ties.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
very good with zip ties now, after being an operator for a while, but with production parts is not
Yeah.
acceptable. So that's a lot of my job, is designing fixtures.
Cool.
I designed laser engraving profiles that can engrave on 3D surfaces so that we can
Wow.
label the parts. That's a lot of fun. I get to work with a lot of lasers.
Wow.
Yeah.
Cool.
Um, I make fixtures for the laser profile, so it's always in the same place.
Yeah.
Really fun little project I got to do is as we move towards like making everything repeatable, we had to move from the laser program that that hi Mimi, what's up?
I'm making,
Hi.
I'm on a call.
oh,
Yeah.
sorry.
What's up?
I'm making a turkey burger. Do you want one?
No, thank you. Yeah,
Okay.
I ate a lot of broccoli at Dad's.
Okay. Sorry to
No, it's
interrupt
okay.
you. I'm glad you have that little card table.
Yeah, it's perfect.
Yeah.
So is that your grandmother, your mom, or
Yeah, my grandmother.
cool?
I get to see my grandparents a lot more now,
Yeah.
which I'm really grateful for.
Nice.
Um,
Okay. Sorry, you were making a project that
yeah,
was really
so
fun.
yeah, I'll start over. You cut that out or not? I don't care. Um, uh, the Yeah, so we have a laser engraver, and there's two programs that you can run on it, that you can operate it with. And one is like admin program. Type stuff in, do whatever you want. You can run it all from the computer. Like it's like how in Linux you can, like, if you want to delete a super important file, it'll let you. And that's the admin program. And then there's a much more locked down program, which is a little laggy, which makes me think that they just reskinned the admin program. But but it doesn't let you do basically anything. And it's kind of like a more traditional manufacturing machine where you
Hmm.
have to like push a file to the machine, give it a job name, and then an operator can come up, open the program, which is called Marking Monitor, and they can select a job name. And then basically all that they're allowed to do from that program is press go. Um, and like I can control like whether the program will just choose not to run if the part is more than 2 millimeters out of spec or
Right, right.
something. Like I can set all those numbers behind the scenes. But the problem is the admin program has this nice feature where you can turn on a red visual laser and see where the engraving is going to be ahead of time. And the lockdown program doesn't have that at all. And I told the laser manufacturer's sales rep, I was like, hey, this is just isn't gonna work. Like, I need the visual laser. And he's like, all right, look, you can't activate it from the computer from the lockdown program, but there are a bunch of pins on the back of the machine. And if you can tie into those, one of them turns the visual laser on and one of them turns it off.
Mm.
And then these other binary input ones tell you which kind of laser it is. So I had to like get a pinout connector, duplicate all the jumpers they already had, add my own, make a little switch assembly, figure out all the digital logic, and then I ended up with this little switch housing where I have one switch that what it actually does is it changes the binary input from 4 to 5. But in practice, it selects between different types of visual guide laser, and then another one that turns it on or off.
Yeah,
And it worked. It worked
yeah,
great.
that's great.
Yeah, so that was one of the most fun projects I've gotten to do. So that's kind of, yeah, it's that
That's
and
nice.
fighting with a big heat treatment furnace is most of my life now. Yeah.
All right, so let me ask another question, the next one. Um, and this is kind of like overarching now.
Mhm.
How has your engineering degree impacted your life or your quality of life? In other words, what opportunities do you experience that you would not have experienced without your engineering degree? How does it impact your life?
I mean, it's extremely positive. It the degree the degree itself, like the piece of paper, is a nice mark of like an accomplishment, but like the biggest and yeah, you need it to get a lot of jobs, but uh the biggest like emotional accomplishment is it's not really that I've done it, because that implies a completion of a process, whereas it more feels like I'm in a continuous process of removing restrictions from myself. If that, I don't know if that makes sense, but the longer I'm learning every day at my job,
Yeah.
and like you go through waves where it's like, oh, this is a really hard challenge. Oh, I get it. This feels great. And then I'm gonna ride this for a while, and then you run into another challenge.
Yeah.
Um, and
It
but
sounds,
what you don't see is, huh?
oh, no, no, go.
But like what's kind of hard to see in the moment is that every time you go up, then like you get to ride the crest of that wave for a little while, you don't go down as far, and so you're the sum total of my ability and my confidence goes up,
Yeah.
and beneath the actual skills I'm learning on an emotional level, I'm always learning that I'm slowly like learning on a deep level that it's a good thing if I didn't get something the first time and that I just and that I will get it when I like poke at it a few more times. It's because it's just that's just how things work.
Yeah,
And so it's very empowering to not feel deflated when I don't get something the first time. And I think it's something that I'll continue learning for the rest of my life.
yeah. Wow, sounds great.
Yeah.
And you're accepting challenges. You're confident you're going to succeed, and so the degree in the way is giving you one opportunities, right? Opportunities and jobs, and then also the confidence that you're going to learn something new and be challenged, and then be more confident on the next challenge. It sounds like.
Yeah. Yeah, the work that I did to get the degree, uh, and the work that I continue to do to improve myself uh, is the and then the impacts that I see from doing that work, like the validation,
Yeah,
is kind of the most empowering thing because
right.
every time that I push through a challenge and then get validated, it kind of reinforces that like it's almost like now when I come up against something really difficult and then I absolutely biff it on the first round, then it's like okay, got the first round biff out of the
Sure.
way. Excellent. Now I can like now I'm closer to not biffing it because it's
Right,
just you
right.
just eventually learn that it's just what happens.
Yeah,
Yeah.
cool. All right, another overarching question. What one or two suggestions do you have for engineering students that are now on their educational path? And what suggestions do you have for them as a student or for moving into their career?
Um,
Maybe something you didn't do or something you learned along the way that you think would be really helpful to know sooner than later.
yes, like start writing your resume now, be ready for it to get torn to shreds. The first resume you write will be terrible. The 10th resume you write will probably also be terrible. Just like keep running it by experienced people. Everybody you show it to is going to have a different opinion, often contrasting. So just like, to some degree, pick the one that you agree with. The leader of the Bell program hates bullet points. He just does not like bullet points and resumes. I disagree, and I have ignored him on that. Every other piece of feedback he's ever given me, I've taken. I ignore him on that one. And like, other facilitators are a little like, yeah, Ron just has it out for bullet points. But yeah, that's a good one because the earlier you can just keep that running, um, and start like it helps you actually like remember what it is you've done that's impressive.
Mm,
Uh, because there's usually more than you can think of in any given second. And then develop connections with the people that with whom you can create a positive feedback loop of success. Recognize those people who who where you're building each other up and connect with those people. And then as you move into industry, when sometimes you'll meet people who just like have a lot of experience and really know what they're doing, and just like try to listen to those people, and then yeah, listen to and trust those people, and then find them on LinkedIn and connect
yeah.
it, keep in touch because they're absolute gems. Yeah, yeah, that and just attack things like try and get that first failure out of the way quickly, whether it's a school assignment or something. Just throw out a ugly first draft or like try and do the problem and then just completely fail and then go to sleep, and then wake up and try it again the next day.
Mm,
Because the more times you attack a problem, the easier it is in total.
yeah,
So yeah, that's
cool.
yeah.
Well, Isaac, thanks so much for
Thanks, Joanne.
making this video with me and so that I could share it with students. And It'll help them along their way. And it was
Yeah.
great seeing you. Let
You too.
me stop the recording, okay? Hang on a
Yeah.
second.